Welcome to Emergency Medicine Remix, episode X19. Guess who's coming to dinner? From the Sidney Poitier classic movie of interracial relationship, social mores, xenophobia, we're going to have a table where we sit down and break bread with people that you didn't expect to show up for dinner tonight. The menus will change. Sometimes it's kosher, but everything ain't kosher. So today we're bringing to you our brother, Jawad Shahed, one of the four-headed monster we know as Emergency Medicine Remix, who's going to kind of sit down, break bread, chop it up with us as we determine what it's like sometimes to be the unexpected guest at the table. Brother, everybody knows you, but go ahead and introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing? This is Jawad. Like John said, I'm one of the four musketeers. I know it's three musketeers. When we said the four musketeers with the EMR remix, kind of quick background. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. Lived there for probably 11 years of my life, but I am of Pakistani descent. Moved to the States, went to medicine at Stony Brook, grew up in New York. I would say Long Island, Strong Island, where I'm from. And then did my residency at Stony Brook. Was a Stony Brook lifer. Then finally found my way down to Atlanta, where I was lucky to meet John and Chris. And then just moved back up north after the birth of our son to be near family. So back in the great state of New York.
All right. And congratulations again. I think people saw in some of the other episodes, you were literally recording from the crib. And I don't mean that in slang. I mean, literally there's a crib in the background.
Yeah.
So,
and I just finally got my new crib in New York, you know? So like,
we're in New York right now. This is
with my library here, you know? And so
he's our dinner guest, as you can see right here. And we're gonna sit down. Jawad, now, do your people eat hors d'oeuvres? I know that's a French term. Do you guys eat hors d'oeuvres?
Yeah, we have hors d'oeuvres, appetizers.
Okay,
we get a little bit of the samosas, you know, the pakoras, you know.
I know about samosas.
We got those. Yeah, we got those.
I know about samosas. Yeah. You guys got to get your menu game up if you don't know what samosas are. But today's topic, and I just said it tongue in cheek about what you eat and what we eat. But sometimes we take for granted that people who we think are very different than us are very similar to us. And sometimes we think people who are very similar to us sometimes have subtle differences that we may be ignorant to. So this is a time to actually learn about each other, to learn about things that we are blind to, and to give voice to people sometimes we overlook and don't take the time to hear their stories. So, Brother Jawad, you're going to chop it up for me. We're not used to having halal on the menu, but that's what's on the menu today. So you're going to break it down for us.
Ooh, look at those glasses.
Thank you. This is my Jimmy Stewart look. We're going to tell me what it's like, man. I mean, you grew up in New York during a time where, it was not unusual to see people walking around with hijabs. It was not unusual to have other brothers and sisters of Islam there. And when I say Islam, I'm talking about the total diaspora of the faith. I'm not just talking about the nation of Islam. People think Islam and they think Malcolm X immediately, and they think of Elijah Muhammad. But I want you to school us. That experience is just the African-American experience in Islam. It is a diverse ancient heritage that's worldwide that sometimes we are totally ignorant to, and all we know about is the aftermath of 9/11, which does not define you or the people of your faith. So, man, break it down. Tell me a little bit about what it's been like being a Muslim in America, and you grew up in Saudi Arabia. This school us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of actually surprised when we talk halal on the menu. I think we're going to talk biryani, tandoori chicken. I feel like I walked into a whole different conversation, No, all jokes aside. So, I mean, I think, before kind of talking about growing up in America, I just want to kind of say I was born in Saudi Arabia, which is a huge Arab country, one of the biggest, it's Muslim countries. It's known to have the two most religious sites in our faith, which is Mecca and Medina, right? Which were where the Prophet Muhammad kind of started the faith and propagated it, basically. And so growing there, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think one of the tough parts of growing up in Saudi Arabia was you would think that being a Muslim country, me being Muslim of Pakistani descent, that we'd be a little bit more united. but we actually weren't. Like, in Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, I was born in Saudi Arabia, but I never got Saudi citizenship because over there, you had to have some kind of Saudi background. Your father had to be Saudi. Your grandparent had to be Saudi. So for me, luckily, Pakistan, where my parents were from, gave my brothers and I citizenship. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'll always be proud of being Pakistani, because I was going to be a citizen of no state, and so Pakistan really took care of us, and we experienced a lot of prejudice in Saudi Arabia being brown, right? And so I think you see in America, we see a huge Latino and Black population kind of getting jobs that nobody wants, right? And so in Saudi Arabia, it was us, the brown people, right? It was Pakistanis, Indians, Bengalis, people from Sri Lanka who would be doing all these jobs, being mistreated, being maids and things like that, and so we kind of face a lot of those things there. I mean, when we were younger, playing sports outside, just playing cricket, soccer or football. We used to play those all the time, but I remember there's one day where these Saudi kids in their bikes came with these, the large tubing, I guess the light bulbs that are like tubes, with those chains kind of chasing us down to beat us up and stuff because we were.
You mean like the fluorescent light bulb?
Yeah, the fluorescent light
bulbs. They were
chasing
with those glass tubes that hit you with them?
Yeah, because we were Pakistani. I mean, one of the crazy things I remember too is like Saudi Arabia kind of had no rules. So we used to go on long drives and stuff. So my dad wanted to get a station wagon from his buddy who was moving back to Pakistan. So John, if you had a station wagon, I can buy the car from you, get the title, all that good stuff. And now the car's mine, right? But being Pakistani, like we had to basically my dad had to go to court to a judge and make the case of why he needed the station wagon. And the judge was like, no, because Pakistanis smuggle people into Saudi Arabia. So we're not allowing that. So because my dad's like, hey, it's a bigger car. The kids can just sleep in the trunk, and so seatbelts, nothing, and so
that was, wait, so I'm just, don't let me throw you off your subject matter, but what you've already described is a lifestyle that was very akin to the way we grew up. I remember, being chased down the street in my own neighborhood, being called the N-word. I can say it, but everybody knows what I'm referring to. Yeah. I remember, growing up and saying that we weren't allowed to go into this place, even though we're quote unquote American citizens. We weren't, that's the Elks Lodge or this place was, for members only, which normally means that if you weren't white, you didn't get to go in. And this is my lifetime. And then I remember too, like you, the idea of the station wagons in the 70s, man. We used to, walk across from the back of the seat and stuff, no seat belts, man. Take a nap in the back while people were driving and stuff. So your experience, although from a different country, is very akin to ours. I mean, at least my upbringing.
And I think if you look at like just the civil rights movement, just Black history, I think the Black population was considered to be a second-class citizen, right? And that's why we were in Saudi Arabia. We were a second-class citizen. And so, it's interesting, in Arabic, the term is Sadiq, which means friend, which is a high form, like a word that's of high status. If you say like, that's my friend, like John, you're my Sadiq, right? Close friend. Honestly, in Atlanta, you're one of my best friends, right? So, but there's another term called Rafiq, which is acquaintance, which is kind of more of a derogatory term. And that's what all the Arabs are called brown people. Hey, Rafiq. Like, and if you say Rafiki, which means adding an I at the end of an Arabic word becomes my, right? So Rafiki means my friend. So they were, so that's how we were basically treated. I mean, as a kid, I really didn't see that as much because I was too young. But these are stories that kind of from my dad kind of telling us and growing up how we were like, hey, we can't be in this situation or be around this situation because we don't want to deal with certain Saudis in a certain way, right? So there's a group of people that you didn't want to mess with. I remember my dad got into it. We were younger at the time, and my dad got into a car accident. But since my dad didn't know Arabic that well, the cops came and the Saudi guy that hit us in the back. Right? If I hit you in the back of the car, it would be my fault at the end. That's typically what we're told, right? Unless there's something egregiously wrong. But there, the guy was trying to make a case, basically because he can speak the language, trying to say that how my dad was at fault, even though my dad was in the front of the car and had to go to court and all that kind of stuff, and just craziness in terms of how dealing with, because we didn't fit in that place, right? Right. So then moving to the United States, I think kind of moving to New York, and it's something I always talked about why I always loved New York, was I felt like I always fit in. Was in a place where I kind of felt like I finally fit in. Like going back to Pakistan to visit family was kind of difficult because I didn't grow up there, even though, I was Pakistani because of a background of my ethnicity and stuff, but I never grew up there. So I never felt like, hey, I had this true allegiance to this country because we went there, once a year. To visit family, but never felt like this was truly my country. But in America, you felt like, hey, you kind of fit in a little bit. Things were great, and then of course 9/11 happened. And that's when kind of things changed. And I think that put, I think us as a group in the forefront in the population, right? I mean, I was joking around like the recent debate that happened with Biden and Trump. We weren't mentioned once. I was shocked.
Right.
Like every presidential debate, you mentioned Muslim or the Middle East or something like that. We weren't mentioned once.
And at least in the
I got nervous. I was like, "What's going on?"
Last 20 years. No, you're exactly right. Last 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm saying this, as just to make light of it, but it's really no joke. That man, they were part of us. Black people were like, shoot. The heat's not on us now. Somebody else. Back in the days, it was always us. We were always, persona non grata. Like I said, look, guess who's coming to dinner? Black man sit down at the table and everybody's like, collecting their purses and stuff.
Yeah.
After 9/11, my wife, who's, brown, who's Indian, but not Muslim, she and her other friend, who's actually biracial, she's white and basically, her dad's from Cote d'Ivoire, so Ivory Coast. So she's truly African American.
Yeah.
They went out to a club in D.C. and somebody walks up to him and was like, despite what happened in New York in 9/11, and I forgive your people. And she's like, what the devil just happened? They got racially profiled just by being a little brown of a slightly different shade.
Yeah.
So man, black people were like, shoot, this is deep. We're watching a whole nother group of people having the country turn against them. In a similar way that we kind of experienced it in this.
100%. And I think, I think that was the hard part because, I think we experienced that in Saudi Arabia, like how we were treated differently. And I think you finally came to the United States where you felt like, hey, like this is the land of opportunity and getting some great opportunity to kind of be educated in America. That's all everybody's dream, right? Was to come to America at the end of the day, right? And so we finally were able to make, thankfully, like my aunt lived here in the 70s, kind of helped us get sponsored, and we ended up moving to the United States. And I got citizenship now. That's my citizenship, it's American citizenship. But now, like after 9/11, that was the thing, like we became on the forefront where we were treated horribly, right? And we kind of, I remember when I was in biology class when 9/11 happened, and I remember I got scared because my dad was working in the city. And so then I didn't know Manhattan that well at the time. So, right. And I didn't know, was this attack near where my dad was? Like, is my dad okay? Was that his building? Like, and so it was something we were dealing with the stress too. Like, I mean, because my dad works in the city, like maybe something could have happened to him. He could have been a victim of this thing. But I remember the days later on where like, I remember I was in class and one kid got like, the eyedropper in water. He just kind of started squirting it at me. He's like, hey, we're going to get you. And so now, like, right?
Wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I still,
or something? Like
yeah, right. But like little minuscule amounts of water, And so, but it was crazy. So just squirting it, we're going to get you. My brother, like at the time, I mean, that's unfortunately like with a lot of us brown people, we tend to be very hairy from the get-go. So my older brother had a beard by then too. And so they would say to him, like, so like they were like, hey, like, is Bin Laden your uncle? And things like that.
Oh man, that's messed up.
Yeah, so we used to get that kind of treatment all the time. I remember there's a kid in my high school who got beat up pretty badly. And so I grew up in Long Island, in an area that's predominantly white. And so...
What part of Long Island did you grow up on?
So basically, I grew up in a town called Farmingville. And I grew up in a school district called Sachem. And so basically, it was right near where your wife grew up. South of where your wife grew up.
Right,
so I knew she was born in Melville.
Yeah, Ward Millville, so, Stony Brook, Port Jeff, and then
so basically, like Stony Brook's here, we were like right down south of that area, and it's heavily white population.
Shout out to Strong Island. Yeah, just gotta give it. Set up. Shout out to all the people at Strong Island. Go ahead.
And so like he got beat up because of him being brown, right? And so I mean, we saw throughout the nation that movement, where like in Wisconsin, where a Sikh temple got shot up, because they thought that they were Muslims, right? And so because they had beards, they wore turbans, and so and that sentiment kind of changed. And it's like, I'll be honest, I was like, man, like this is exactly like what we went through when I grew up in Saudi Arabia. And it's like, now it's like, again, we're this second class group that, doesn't have access, right? I mean, as a kid, I mean, everything we were just so super scared was that, my dad was always like, my dad is one of the most pessimistic and paranoid men I've met in my life. And so he used to get like we couldn't get certain books. Like, like I had interest in politics at that time too, right? I mean, slowly got into it. And shout out to one of the greatest bands out there, I think is Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, Zach De La Rocha.
Absolutely. And so with Tom Morello and stuff, amazing group. And so because of them, I got really into politics and wanted to get certain books to read about. But my dad was like, no, like you're going to be put on this list, that the government's going to find us and things like that. So everything, we couldn't say certain things on the phone. Like family would call and be like, hey, are you guys okay? But like, don't talk about anything political, because there's this paranoia. I remember when I was in college, there was an organization called the Muslim Student Association, right? Where the MSA, that we used to get together. So my older brother was president at St. John's in Queens, and I became vice president in my junior year. But all of a sudden, I remember my dad found out, because my older brother's a year above me. When he found out, like, my dad was devastated. I quickly resigned. I was like, oh man, because my dad did not want us to get involved, because we're like, that's going to put us on the map, and like, are like agents going to go after us and all that kind of stuff, so it kind of put us in a situation where we're kind of very nervous to kind of behave a certain way or act a certain way, where we used to joke around like, let's buy a lot of USA t-shirts, so like people that we're so pro-America, and so
you're I noticed that. So I remember after 9/11, I remember like New York and the cities and stuff, people who had if you're in the Bronx or if you're in New York, they used to call them bodegas, but the convenience stores, right? And my brown
100%.
brothers and sisters, even down in Virginia and even in Chicago, in the convenience stores, man, they were repping U.S. flags like it was
we were like straight up patriots, man. We're like, hell yeah, man,
right.
USA all the way, and so because we're like, we have to show this, because if we don't, like, they're gonna be like, hey, then you guys are not part of the country. We're gonna get assaulted or abused or hurt or whatever it is, and so
I mean, it was like dude had like a whole Dapper Dan suit that was like made out of the U.S. flag, man. I was like, what? But I get it. That's survival, right?
It was. And at the end, like, you're doing whatever you can to adapt and be part of the thing. And I'll be honest, I think it's during my life where I think I started becoming very whitewashed. Like, I think it was an area in a high school where it was predominantly white, and then you kind of start becoming ashamed of your ethnicity, your race, your religion, and I'll be honest, it's something that I don't really talk about, but I think it's kind of important. But there's a period in my life, especially in high school, where I was agnostic, where I started questioning faith, and so it's just like, because at the end you're scared, because all the time you just hit in media that Islam was violent, right? And something that I always kind of, one of my favorite figures right now is Khalid Beydoun, who's who's a lawyer out in Detroit, but he's also wrote an awesome book called American Islamophobia. And I think he makes a very important point where I think
shout out to the D. We got to give this K4 song. Shout out to Detroit. Large population of
Muslim and Arab population
Muslims
out there,
and Arabs in that Dearborn, Detroit. So we shout out to you guys too.
Huge.
All right, so go ahead. So tell me.
And so basically, where he kind of made an important point was, like, I think talking about American politics and stuff, where Islam became the only religion which always had to use this adjective of moderate, right? Extremism, moderate and stuff. And so we kind of trying to tell people that Islam is inherently violent, and you have to be, in order to be a good Muslim, you got to be moderate, right? And so you don't hear that anywhere. You don't hear moderate Christian, right? Modern Jews, right? So because every faith is considered to be peaceful except for Islam, right? And John, I'm going to give you an example where it's so funny how this stuff was propagated in schools. When I was in high school, in 10th grade, we were talking about global history. And so we were talking about the Abrahamic faiths. And so I remember we were talking about Judaism. And, at that, you had handouts back then. And so we kind of gave the handouts, kind of passing it back. And so there's basically a picture of God, Abraham, Moses, and this of just standing in the figure or something like, with their hands out or whatever. And then we talked about Christianity. And so same thing, you had a picture of God, you have Jesus, again, bearded men, long hair, again, with just standing there with their arms out. But then when we talked about Islam, again, they basically, one was just before I talk about in Islam, they came to the handout where basically there was 4 men standing there. There was God, the figure of God. Then it was Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad. But it's so funny that all 4 of them had swords in their hands, right? So for them, the other 2 faiths didn't have anything in their hands. But Islam, you had swords in their hands, right? So again, I think he's trying to spread that Islam was spread by violence, right? So, which kind of, but like, again, maybe it's innocent, right? I don't think it was innocent, but I think there's definitely this subliminal message going on here that Islam is this violent faith, right? And so you have, and the things that, if you think about just theologically speaking too, like, we believe that, God is beyond space and time. So it's not bound by a figure. And so just putting him up there in this bearded man with long hair and beard in a tunic, Like that's not our
sacrilegious.
perception. Yeah. And so
Right,
like for us, like
right.
that's a little offensive, right? So it's like,
Right.
because to God is beyond time and space. Like we don't know how God looks like, right? Because
Right.
at the end of the day,
That's what
so
got Charlie Hebdo in trouble over,
yeah,
just
right,
multiple years.
right. And
Yeah.
so, and again, like that's something that, again, like I'm not condoning that behavior. Like I think it's just like not to. I think that's our problem too. I think with Muslims that we react too quickly. I think in
No,
the
wait.
Eastern world,
Well,
like,
I'm gonna check. I'm gonna check you like I need to be checked sometime.
yeah,
Some Muslims, as some people act too quickly. Yeah,
some, yeah.
don't give
No, no,
anybody
absolutely.
any
Yeah, no,
fodder
fair.
to put you guys in a box. Just
Oh
as
yeah, yeah,
I
definitely. I
should, and
mean,
I've done
so
it. I do it like, man,
yeah,
black
yeah,
people are Christians. I do it all the time.
yeah,
So, but we
yeah.
want to. We don't want to be the example that we're condemning. We don't want to be, it's like, the person that I critique or the thing I hate the most is what I've become. That's how
Yeah.
the saying goes. So yeah, no, some Muslims react too quickly, just
fair.
as some Christians do. So go ahead, man, keep preaching.
Fair, fair. And that's the thing too. I think that's the hard part too. I think when it comes to faith or any kind of human, like whatever labels we go with humanity, like we're not monolithic, right? So each
Right.
person is based on our experience.
I'm
right?
going to do it. I'm going to do it. Run it back. Run it back.
I'm gonna run it back. I'm gonna run it back.
Run it back from it.
So we're
now
not
what?
all monolithic, right? We're all everything in our experience, whether it comes to religion, politics, the way that we identify ourselves is based on experience, right? So my experience within the Islamic faith is gonna be different from, say, my wife's, right, or my brother's, right? So we're all in a very different state in our lives, and we have different experiences in our life, right? But a lot of people have certain experiences and they, hey, there is no God because I had this calamity that fell upon me, right? But there's some people from the perspective, hey, this calamity fell on me and makes me stronger in my faith with God, right? So, we're all in this different spectrum, right? From our lack of faith to just having this identity of being Muslim, but just not really following the faith, to basically who are very conservative and follow everything to the teeth, right? So we're not monolithic figures. Whatever it is, whether it's Islam, is Christianity, capitalism, communism, whatever you identify by, we all kind of fall in a spectrum. And so I think that's the thing, is it's just we just got labeled into this kind of whatever. Like, I mean, with any minority population, just got labeled into this certain behavior, right? And so again, where I grew up, like kind of, I know since it's like Latin Heritage Month and stuff, like Long Island had a huge, day labor population from different Latino countries who were illegal, right? And so we had situations where basically people would be, like these day laborers would be assaulted. We had a house that got firebombed by kids in my high school that I knew. So these are realities. So that's something that we faced when we were in America. So we had a huge anti-Hispanic population in Long Island where I was growing up, especially with this anti-Islamic Islamic population that's going up. I remember one of our neighbors, super awesome guy, he was like in his 80s. So we used to mow his lawn, shovel his snow, because he's just older, and he's a guy who did everything on his own, but we felt bad. Like, so my dad and us, like the kids, we used to go out and help him out. And remember he was outside by the fence. And so my dad went to go talk to him, and we were with him when we were younger. And he's talking to his son, and like, hey, this is Shahid. That's my dad's first name. And this is his kids and stuff. And so, but he's like, they're Pakistani, but they're good Pakistanis. Like, why is that term being used, right? So like, what do you mean by that? And so, again, like we're just a inherently violent group, but there's this few of us that are actually good, and
right,
so.
Right. You just hit on, I'm just going to connect the dots. That's a phrase that I have, of when you get to know people and a variety of people, you can see the patterns in their lives and their experiences, but you got to know more than one person. You can't connect just 100%. One dot. So, I'm going to connect your dot to my dot. You're one of several, brown brothers and sisters I know, and of, the Islamic faith. That's not unique to me, but there's a unique bridge that you and I have, or as far as in a common shared experience that even some black people and some brown people may not have experienced. And what you described was this profiling that sometimes happens, that you are the good one. You are the one who stands out. You're not like the rest. I remember being told, on my soccer team, it's like, oh, you're pretty cool for a black guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, even did you realize you just use a vernacular that comes, predominantly from, my culture, that, this whole, ethos of what is cool and uncool. And, that was why he thought it was a compliment. It's no more compliment than, they're good Pakistanis, the standard default of a whole group of people is one of violence and negativity. That was, the narrative of Birth of a Nation, you know, the the horrible film that has literally been a trope in Black America, where we are normally sex crazed, we are violent, we are not law abiding, and it is the obligation of militia, the Ku Klux Klan, and others to keep us away from their prizes, such as land and the white woman. I mean, you know, and I'm not making this up. This is not any type of hate speech. This is actual American history, just as what you talked about as a part of American history. So tell me about, you know, you brought down, you know, how you're perceived. How's that perception even in the emergency department? We see patients that come across our care from all over the world, right? We, you know, the emergency department can't shut the door to anybody. So tell me, as a provider, as well as maybe even a patient, you know, how that has impacted your life.
Yeah, fair, absolutely. And so I think one of the beautiful parts of being in the emergency department, I think you get a microcosm of the landscape of American politics or American sentiments, right? And so I think for me in New York, I think maybe, I mean, looking back, I mean, I always told you about this, you know, like we're in New York, I kind of don't remember when I did residency of any kind of judgment based on being brown, but maybe just I was too naive and I didn't pick up on him. I just remember one thing where I had this guy that came in who said, I have belly pain after I ate a hamburger. You wouldn't know because you don't eat beef. And I'm like, the wrong brown guy, you know, it's like, I actually do eat beef, you know? And so, but I remember, and I guess I think one of the hard parts being in New York and Atlanta was, even in where we were, you know, I loved the job there, but I think you kind of noticed at the city and sometimes even at work, like things were a little bit more segregated, where I felt like the Black nurses hung out with the Black nurses, the Black techs with the Black techs, the white nurses with the white nurses and stuff. So I think for me as a New Yorker, it was kind of odd. But I would have I think and I've told you this multiple times, one of the hard parts of being brown in Atlanta was that I think people weren't used to us, I think, because I think you had to be white or Black, I think, in order to kind of fit in Atlanta. And I think you didn't kind of. So I remember, like, you know, I had a lot of patients say a lot of interesting things. I remember I had one patient who was Black. As I walked in, it was a patient that another doctor had seen and kind of told me about it when they were leaving because their shift ended. And I went to go see the patient, like, hey, you know, I'm Jawad. I'm one of the emergency docs. My mentors always use their first name. So I used to using my first name. And she looks at me, she's like, I know a lot of Patels. And I'm like, I was like, I'm not a Patel, you know? And so, and I think that's the main thing people get things that I'm Indian, right? So, but it's funny. And she's like, you know, where are you from? And I'm like, I was like, I'm not Indian. She's like, then where are you from? I was like, and I get annoyed because I've been asked a lot in Atlanta. I was asked that a lot. And so it's kind of like, that's not
because they're trying to fit you into a box. Race is a perception set. It's a schema. And we believe that once we are able to fit someone into that category, we know more about them or how to interact with them, which really just is actually is an illusion. It is that you know no more about an individual just by putting them into any type of category. You haven't met that individual, so you can draw some generalizations that are applicable to a class or group, but it may not apply to that individual. Why we invited you for dinner today.
Yeah. And absolutely. And honestly, like, you know, it could have been innocent kind of way of connecting with me. I don't know. And so she was like, you know, you're from Tanzania. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not from Tanzania. She's like, Israel. I was like, no. Like mentioned a couple other countries. And she's like, where are you from? And I was like, I'm from New York. And she's like, you don't look like a New Yorker. I'm like, what does a New Yorker look like? Like New York is like probably one of the most diverse states. And so she's like, but where are you really from? I was like, well, my parents are from Pakistan, right? And she's like, oh, I dated a Pakistani. His last name was Gandhi. I was like, no, he probably wasn't Pakistani, right? So like, but you know, I had first time in my life where I actually had a patient as I walked in, so like, I want to see a white doctor. I never experienced that in my life, and I just.
Who said it? Who said it?
It was a white lady. And so I remember she was
I'm just trying to let people know that you know, in this spirit of Ibrahim Kendi, racism is an equal opportunity disease. You know, we think that 100%. It's only white to Black or Black to white. Shoot, we have racism within certain racially identified groups, within group racism, and colorism being a subset of that. So so I was just trying to do that, not to point out that typical white man, typical white person, just to hear how racism just kind of spreads and kind of infiltrates into all of our thinkings and all of our behavior.
Fair.
Go ahead.
And that's the thing. Like, I was like, I'm not gonna tolerate that, right? I'm like, when she said that to me, she's like, I'm from Sandy Springs, which is known to be a pretty white town city in right up north of Atlanta. And she's like, go to Sandy. She's like, I'm from Sandy Springs, and I was like, just go to Sandy Springs, see a white doctor up there. Then, like, I'm not gonna cater like, hey, go find
Right.
another doctor and be like, hey, oh, they want to see a white doctor. It's like, we're not tolerating that. But you know,
Right. Right.
and it's crazy. And so, like, I was talking to one of the patient liaisons at Emory where we worked, where I worked with you. And so she told me that basically there was an awesome attending, man, like absolutely love. And he's the one that has the big beard, wears the goofy, which is the skull cap that Muslims wear. And there was a black husband who brought his black wife in, and she basically foreclosed her for stroke. And so he was walking towards the room, and there was a black nurse who's a hijabi who wears a headscarf. And so walking towards him, the patient got up. She's like, I'm not having bin Laden take care of me, and walked out, right? And so, like, these are things, again, these are sentiments that you're seeing in the real world that you actually get to experience in the emergency room as well too. And
Right.
so, which I was completely blown away when she told me that. And so I was like, again, like, I mean, we're not, I always joke
And
around.
anybody who knows, I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about. You're talking about Osama.
yeah, Osama, yeah.
He is a
Yeah,
mad cool brother. I'll be
he's,
honest with you.
yeah,
He's a fantastic individual,
yeah,
and that person's prejudice, once again,
yeah,
another
yeah,
discriminated group, somebody who was
yeah,
already a
yeah,
recipient in this country
yeah,
of similar discrimination, easily took that prejudice and exported it,
yeah,
carried it with them, and weaponized it, in the way it's been weaponized against them. So,
yeah, fair.
so
You
that
know,
there you go, as
and
as
this
a
thing.
provider.
Yeah, and the things is funny because, like, you're saying, like, Osama is an awesome guy, like one of my favorite people ever, one of my closest friends in Atlanta, and still, I love the brother to death, But the things, and it's unfortunate because she really missed out on a wonderful physician to take care of her,
Absolutely,
right? Because he's a
absolutely.
phenomenal doctor, right? And so,
He is
um,
absolutely.
amazing, and she missed out on having a wonderful doctor taking care of her, And so, and it's sad, right? And so, but these sentiments are real, right? And so. But then again, like, I was talking to one of, he was an MP student at Emory, but now he's up with me here in New York City now. And so he was telling me too, we were kind of just talking about these things between Atlanta versus New York. And we're like, one of the things in Atlanta is you actually know who to be careful of because they kind of, those sentiments are kind of out on your sleeve. I think the hard part in New York is that it's more subtle. And I think
Right.
before I used to be like all about, hey, like New York is great. It's so diverse and tolerant. But I think more and more that I think after my experience with Atlanta, I think I'm kind of more perceptive of it now that I do sense this sense of subtle bias. I would say it happens to my wife. My wife wears a headscarf, and she gets stares all the time now. And I never noticed that before. But we're
Right.
here, like when we go out for a walk, people are staring at her because she wears a headscarf. And so I had a patient, one of my first patients in New York City, basically kept saying like, hey, hey, I'm Jawad. I'll be your doctor today. Jawad, very unusual name. Very unusual name. And kept saying it. And finally to the point where I got annoyed and it said like, well, it's not unusual to me. And she's like, oh, fair enough. And I can, like, her name was very generic, like Samantha Brown. I could be straight up like, man, that name's pretty foreign
Right.
and unusual
Right.
to me, And so
Right.
but I'm starting to sense like, it's kind of a reality, like whether it's New York City or not, these sentiments it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it
So
doesn't
so
really
so
matter
I'm
at
I'm
all.
gonna boil it down. So you don't have to be black, you don't have to be poor, you don't have to be uneducated to be a victim of discrimination. It doesn't always have to be because of race.
Yeah.
It can be because of just who you pray to and who you believe in, or
Yeah.
shoot, the texture of your hair. Okay, because let's be honest, you're just another shade of brown, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your shade of brown in this country falls into the category of black and Latino as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the texture of your hair makes it a little different for some.
Yeah.
And then, I'm going to go even further and say that even within our own groups in our own land, let's talk about it. The reason that you identify as Pakistani, versus Indian or that, following the faith of Islam versus Hinduism versus Christianity has a violent past within a region where people were brothers and sisters for one period of time, right? There's a commonality. The partition. There was a bloody revolution where
100%.
people fought against each other who really look alike. So we got to wake up to think that we are so different in so many ways based on these subtle things that are all subjective. They're all subjective.
100%, and I think that's the thing with especially with our history with the Indian subcontinent. I mean, it's unfortunate because I think we were a cohesive group of people until the British came in, right? And I think that kind of really started dividing us apart. And I think that's the issue. And I think that really drew us far apart. And those wounds still run deep. I mean, we see what's going on in India right now with Modi being the prime minister, where it being with Hindu nationalism. They're suppressing a lot of Muslims, right? And so it's getting to the point. And yeah, I mean, fair. There are Muslim regimes out there that are abusing other minorities. It's true. It goes both ways, but it's the same thing with us as being victims. But I think, kind of one again, I believe it was Khalid Beydoun. He's one of my favorite figures right now, and he kind of said it where when it's Muslims being the perpetrators or aggressors, we're newsworthy, but when it's us being as victims, we're not newsworthy, right? And so, I mean, one of the big things I can kind of talk about is that's kind of happening right now that I'm sure people kind of know about is the flight of the Uyghur Muslims in China, where they're kind of in concentration camps, they're being abused, it's ethnic cleansing, right? Where they're forcing Muslim women the Muslim Uyghur Muslims to women to marry Chinese men to kind of just get rid of Muslim blood, but like, I mean, Islam is not running in your blood, right? It's kind of
there you go,
and so
there you go. Right.
It's not in your blood. It's a thing. Like I could tomorrow. I'm Muslim right now. Tomorrow I can easily convert to another faith if I want to. Right. So it's a mindset. It's a mentality, an ideology that you kind of subscribe to. But
say it again. No. You know the format. Don't
running
front on us. You got to say it again. Say it again. Yeah. Run it back. You know how to say that again.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a mindset, right? It's a way of life, an ideology that you subscribe to. And I think what I can have in 1 minute, something in my life can change my mindset and thinking, right? So you can't just get rid of it by ethnic cleansing and stuff. But I think one thing that bothers me the most right now too is like you see American celebrity culture where I truly believe in performative activism, where every culture is right now. I think the hot thing right now is Black Lives Matters, right? And so we're so crazy about that, where every brand, every celebrity is focusing on that, but you have Nike that's using Uyghur Muslim concentration camps to make their products, right? So you had H&M kind of do that. You had all these big brands kind of using Uyghur Muslims to make their products, right? And so, which is crazy, but they're talking about Black Lives Matter. Colin Kaepernick is now a big figure within Nike, but they're also now, Uyghur Muslims don't matter. You just want them to make your products, right? I mean, same thing with like, what's her name? Kylie Jenner, part of the Kardashian family, where her brand is basically using Bengali Muslim women to make her products. But I guess because of the pandemic or whatever it is, like these families are living, like 7 families living in one house, using one kitchen, one bathroom. She used to be a billionaire, but is just under shy of being a billionaire now. But they're saying like you can support, because of the fashion industry, you can kind of support these women and give them an income that they're lost so far, but they're not doing it. But they're all about Black Lives Matter, right? So it's cool when it needs to be to stand up for something, but it's not cool when it's certain other populations that are being involved.
Yeah, now let's split the hairs. That is good. That is really good because the saying we always say, it's complicated. That was the criticism of the NBA. Okay, when I think 100%. David Morrissey spoke up and from the executive offices of the Houston Rockets about oppression in China, and then Chinese governmental forces reacted to his open criticism. The NBA was financially, penalized. They said, okay, basically we're going to stop showing your stuff. We're going to shut down your products, your marketing. And the NBA kind of capitulated. They backed down. And then people were like, wait a minute, you're all for, brothers in the NBA and their rights, but you can't export that same liberty and freedom and self-autonomy and self-determination across the water. What's up? Because money's tied to it. And then they tried to straddle the fence, and like, we can't stand up for all issues. He's got a right to stand up for it here. But here's the deal. We value people's lives differently. And we always have done that. Black Lives Matter is popular because it should be, but it is more so as they call it, virtue signaling from people who were not at the table, the NFL and the like, because they see the economic impact it has, not because they see the human impact it has.
Yeah.
And anything that it moves people for the sake of health, well-being of a large swath of people often only comes about because of its economic impacts or how it selfishly influences those who
100%.
hold the reins of power. And so you're watching that. You're exactly right. You're watching it because we like to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. That's what we call this, right? Emergency Medicine Remits is the Emancipation Proclamation for Health. We talk about liberating people from slavery, the slavery of chronic disease and exploitation, slavery from physical human trafficking and the like. But the truth is, slavery was not eradicated.